Okay, I don't hear anybody. Is everybody being very quiet or are my earbuds in failure mode?
Everybody has their sound off, so you can hear me now.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's always makes me feel better that the video looks so much better when the sound is good.
Would have been funny if we all started moving our lips and you didn't see anything.
That's been done, and it's never funny except for the person who's doing it. Yep.
That's what Will Rogers said, right? It's only funny when it happens to somebody else.
Zoom humor.
Hey, Dave, I understand you're a product of St. Joseph's High School also, huh?
Yeah, that's Mike and I.
And
Is
me.
that you too, or and
Yep.
you? Okay.
Yeah.
What year were you?
I was 69.
Okay. Yeah, you were a little ahead of me. I'm just a kid.
Yeah, Mike and I we grew up together.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's funny. I didn't know Mike at all. I didn't meet him back in high school. I certainly wish I had, but I met him for the first time out in Hilliard. So
Oh, really?
it's
Huh.
in the small world department. Yeah.
Well, I worked with Mike on that light show that he had that we used to do for the local bands and everything at one time.
Okay. Well, you know what? I don't even know if I know about that. There's apparently a lot about Mike. Maybe I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Well, one day we'll get together.
Well, do you come by to his house? He usually has
Oh, yeah.
everybody in.
Yeah,
At the get together of crazy TV people in
no,
late
usually,
winter?
no,
Oh,
no, no, we're just friends. We visit every now and
yeah.
then. So,
No,
he
but
always shows me his collection.
Mike usually throws a party in February or so, and we all get together at his house and ooh and ah at all his amazing collection of stuff.
No, I
So
don't think I'll have to give him the business. I don't think I've been invited to that.
yeah, you should be friend number one. You should have got
Yeah.
invitation serial number
Yeah,
001.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, we go back to like fifth grade or sixth grade. We built this bicycle built for two. Two bicycles together, screwed them in at the back. All of a sudden, there we were.
Well, Mike's probably building microprocessor powered bicycles now over at his shop.
I'm wondering if he
He
still has the bike.
guy can do anything.
Yeah,
Uh,
unbelievable the amount of stuff he has too.
so did you
Unbelievable.
did you guys stay in touch? Did you guys stay in touch since high school, or did you fall out of touch and
No,
get back
well,
together?
we had a bit, well, I worked with him on a little business TV repair, I think, when we were like 17, 18, 19, picking up sets, putting a new color tube or black and white tube or fixing it and selling it back in the local little newspaper. But
Mm.
I think, and then, we got married and I touched base every now and then. And I think it was more later on, my aunt put us back in touch with one another. And maybe that was like maybe 10, 15 years later. And then, we've been maintaining a relationship since then. Closer now, more recently, I guess, too, because we call each other every couple of weeks just to see what's going on.
Well, with
Yeah.
all this technology, it's a lot easier to stay in touch with people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, and I have a 63 Riviera that I store at his house. So it's, works out. That one
Okay.
where,
Well, you could store 100 of them there if you wanted to.
well, that's it. Well, that one with the airport hangar, that's the that's the one we're working on these days. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Absolutely true.
There's a couple guys back from the old school days. Did you know Bob Guitars?
No. When was he?
He would have been maybe a year or two after you at most. I met Bob out in Hilliard at the museum too. He's on some of the forums as Ampico kid, but he's got a lot of TVs, antique cars, a lot of televisions. He's another one from back there. There must have been something in the water in Metuchen.
Sometimes the names pop up because I was the editor of the yearbook. So a lot of names, you had to prop the pages. That's what we did, that's what I did. So it was names ran by you more often than not, but yeah, it's a nice friendship to have. I say it all the time. It's kind of cool to have a friendship that's that old, at this point.
Yeah.
You said you were the class of 69?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the same year I graduated high school. I can't believe I went to my 50-year high school reunion. It seemed like when I went to my 10-year, I knew everybody. 20-year, well, they start fading out a little bit. My 50-year, who are these? I thought I was in a nursing home.
I honestly went to see who was still alive. Personally, I was curious,
Julian, true story. I was just going to say, true story. I went back to the high school and, we didn't do anything fancy there. The reunions were all just at the high school building, and they lumped a whole bunch of years together. The first time I went back, I guess it was for the 10th anniversary, or maybe it was after that. But in any case, a couple of us met up out in the parking lot, and we walked into the building, and there were little groups of people gathered in corners in the cafeteria. And the fellow I was walking in with, he points at one group over and he says, "My God, look at how old those guys are." He says, I wonder where our class is. And he goes, "Oh my God, that's our class." It was a wake-up call.
When you get up to those 50s and 60s, it's interesting because some people they're exactly the same way they were before, their personality, and other people have changed. Some of the bullies of the group, they didn't come. I was just as happy personally. I didn't really want to see them.
I went to one, might have been the 30th or so, and a friend of mine, we were in the band together, we were sitting there talking, and another guy comes over, and this was the class bully, the guy who got put into the Catholic school because they threw him out of the public school because he was too much trouble. And he comes over to my friend Jeff, who's a judge now, and he says, "Do you remember me?" And he says, "Of course I remember you. I used to be afraid of you." The dynamics change over the decades, so that's for sure.
I remember there was a bully in my high school. His name was Fred Johnson. He was a big guy. He was a redneck and thought he was cool, had his collar always pulled up. And I mean, he'd go around. I had to avoid this guy. But it was about maybe 5 or 10 years ago. We had a local newspaper here. And I said, had this guy in the front. He said he's a Vietnam vet. He had Agent Orange and blah, 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 and all that. And it said Fred Johnson. I'm looking, I'm like, and he still lives in his dad's house, and now he's like on hard times and all that. He was hoping someone would donate a TV set to him. I said, ordinarily I would give him one, but I can't forget what he did to me in high school. He would just like to beat up on people.
I felt the same way about this one guy. When I heard he wasn't coming, I was like, okay, I'm going.
I can tell you, it probably isn't like that because everybody has changed. It takes longer for some people to grow up. Some people, they have to be maybe 50, 60 years old, but they all eventually grow up.
There was one guy who I cribbed his way through. He had the best cheat sheets in the world, and I'm thinking, wonder what this guy did for a living in the end.
But we were all in the radio club, so I don't think any of us were the bullies. I don't remember any bullies in the radio club.
No,
we were all the guys who got to look out for the bullies.
Mm-hmm. Can you hear me?
This is Chuck. Hello, Chuck. Your name is iPad.
iPad. Oh, I'm on an iPad. Yes. Okay. Well, you name it there. Is that the idea?
You can name it anything you want. I think I could name you something. That would be amusing.
I'll take my chances.
All right. Let's see what we got here.
The funny thing is when I went to a 50th high school reunion, all the nerds had actually still looked pretty good, but all the really studly jocks and bullies and stuff all looked like Santa Claus.
Oh, yeah. I noticed that.
So there was some justice in the world. You
There's
know?
a French say is revanche.
Oh,
I went back at one point and I said, I'm walking in, you know, and I was all, I wasn't nervous like I had to lose weight before I went to the thing, but I'm walking in going like, man, I don't know if anybody's even going to remember me. Nobody's going to remember me. And this guy comes up to me. He goes, Dave, I remember you. He says, you guys were in the band. You were so cool. We had such a good time. And I'm like, I have no idea who you are. So it was really embarrassing.
At my 50-year, when
Conrad,
we
I had a
worked,
question for.
Oh.
Chuck, Conrad, you mentioned something about Pinnacle for getting stuff off of videotape and putting it, digitize it.
Yeah, it works pretty good.
It worked pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, it's not awesome or anything, but it works pretty good and you can edit.
Oh,
So
I just got I need to get some stuff off of videotape digitized so that I can put it up on Facebook or other stuff like that.
that's exactly what I did. And this little thing, I mean, it's a little weird pod that plugs into a USB port on your computer. And it's got both S-video and composite video and left-right audio inputs. And you just let it play.
It plugs in. Will it plug into the Lightning or on my iPod?
I doubt it. There may be a Mac version, but this is the
No,
one
it's
I
not.
got at PC.
This is not Mac. Oh yeah, it is Mac.
Yeah, it is. If you got Lightning, Lightning is a whole other world. We get this all the time at the Broadcast Museum in our events department, event center. People keep bringing in iDevices that have no jacks on them whatsoever.
Yeah.
The Lightning port, and I have a desk drawer full of weird adapters, and keep finding they need more. I wish they just put a USB port or an HDMI port on the thing, get it over with. But,
Yeah.
but no.
That's
we want to sell you some accessories, you know, so.
that reminds me, does anybody need any pro VHS machines, broadcast Sonys? I had some, I've got a bunch more than I need and all that, and I've got some I wouldn't mind getting rid of if anybody needs one, or trade me something for them or something.
While we're asking, can anybody use any professional grade, brand new in the box mini DV tapes or SVHS tapes? Don't all shout at once.
Got a bunch of both, actually. So
yeah, I got a bunch. They're going to end up in the trash if I can't find a home for them.
I hope not, though. We had a guy, I think 2 weeks ago, show up with 1,000 broadcast tape carts with something recorded on every one of them.
Gosh.
It's like, what in the hell are we going to do with this? They were neatly labeled. I'll give them credit for that.
We had a local station here. They gave me a whole bunch of those big super VHS tapes. They're real big, you know, those real large ones. And anyway, I ended up throwing away 2/3 of them because how many do you need? And they were taking up space, and I couldn't get any interest in them, and I just hauled a bunch of them to the dump and get rid of them.
Mine are all mil-spec, literally mil-spec stuff, brand new in the box from JVC, but their time has passed.
Hey, Chuck, what were those carts for? Which machine?
Well, good question, because there's not much standardization in tape carts.
Well, they're either black or red.
Well, actually, some of these are blue, and some of them are brown, and some are gray.
Yeah, well, that's not what I was thinking. They're not quads, right?
No.
I've got tons of RCA carts, but I don't have very many recorded. I've got boxes of brand new Ampex carts, but I don't have anything with recording on them.
Well, these seem to play back. I'm trying to think. I think we got a couple of BE machines that are working right now that they seem to play back on, at least the few I've tried. I really haven't got very far into it. There's just giant piles of boxes of these things. Sometimes you don't know what to do with all this stuff.
Hey, Liz, what's that Ikegami camera you got sitting there? It looks like a 323 or a 357.
Who?
Can you hear me?
Very weak.
It's a SK970.
That was a pretty early one.
Looks like an Icky.
Yeah, it does, but it's actually it's a Hitachi.
How about, does anybody need any Sony, what are they, 370s, I think? Anybody need any of those with a CCU? 3 camera bodies and 2 CCUs and all
And
the
not-
cables and
Not
everything?
not in North America. We got a couple HD cameras we can't give away.
Everybody was wanting cameras, and all of a sudden, all this stuff's coming on the market and nobody wants it. I'd just give them away if somebody come get them.
I
Well,
got
that's half
three.
the battle.
Yeah, I got 3 out of the box Ikegami 357s, which was a really nice 1-inch Plumbicon camera. And these things haven't got a scratch on them, and I can't get anybody to even take them for a museum.
Oh.
The problem is shipping. Unless somebody's willing to drive to where you are.
I mean, anybody on the East Coast, I drive them, but I'm not gonna throw these things out. They
don't.
gorgeous. Not a speck of dirt in them. They're clean as a whistle.
You can always throw them out and destroy them, and get rid of them, but you can't bring them back, 10 years from now. Say, oh, I wish I hadn't have done that.
True. It's a problem.
Hi, everyone. Charlena has asked me to put her first on the schedule tonight because she has a commitment that she's got to get to. So normally I'd let this chatter go on for another 5 minutes or so, but I think we ought to get started so that she can get to her appointment. After she's finished, I will we'll go through our regular schedule of stuff. Dave, do you want to make the usual announcement about being nice?
Well, yeah, somebody just asked about recording the meeting also, and I just mentioned that we do record the meeting, and it's available on the Early Television Museum's website after I get around to it. Yeah, the other thing is as per usual with the Zoom meeting, no weeping, wailing, gnashing of teeth, throwing furniture or dishes around the room. And if you want to do that, just keep your mic on mute, and then you can do whatever you want. Try to be nice to the presenter. Okay, I will start the recording now.
Okay.
And take it away.
Okay, Charlena contacted us, I guess, almost a year ago, saying that she had gotten a TK41 working. She's been on these meetings, I think, since the beginning. And I asked her if she would make a presentation. She said yes. She's short on time, so her plan is tonight. So her plan is to talk for 10 or 15 minutes, and then next week, continue it with whatever questions, and if you want to go into more detail about what she did. So, Charlena, welcome. You got the floor.
Hear me? I have microphone problems. Can you hear me? Hello?
We can hear you, but you're very weak.
Now, is that better?
That's a little better, yeah.
Okay. To start off with, this is a SK970 Hitachi camera. And just to give a little perspective, I don't know if you can see this on the corner. This is the optical block, and you have the amps, the video amps, and the camera tube. I believe these are Saticons. I forget which tube is in this unit. Just a little perspective. This is the yoke out of the TK41. You have the image orbital tube right here. And here's the TK41. And a little perspective. This is the yoke assembly with the focus coil, and you have the alignment coils here. And this is the optical block. A big difference between this and this camera here. Up here are the amplifiers for the image orthicon tube. There's three, one for red, one for green, and one for blue. Blue is in the back. There's another yoke in the back as well. It's taken about 10 years to get this camera going. I was told that this is the only camera working in the world so far. Here are the power supplies. I split them up. One to run the encoder, the preamp. Another one, a second power supply, 280 volts, both of them. This one runs the camera head and the I/O controller, also the focus voltage regulator and the focus current regulator. This is the focus current regulator to run the focus system. Up above this is the I/O controller. You can control the beams, the focus, and also the beam alignment, and also the position of the pitch with the horizontal center and vertical center for each color. Up above that is the prog amp to correct shading. This is the chroma balance, auto chroma balance unit. And up above this is the whole encoder unit. And up above this is the RGB generator that I use for testing the, as you can see, testing the encoder to make sure it's working properly before I switch the camera. And up above is the old 1410 sync generator. Wait, let me turn this light on here. Up above this is the 1410 generator to run the horizontal tri vertigo composite sync. I'm using a 1730 waveform monitor so I can look at the RGB in a parade. This is the vector scope, so I can adjust for the chroma balance. And I use the 1480 to peak out the focus. I'll put a resolution chart and peak out the focus with this unit here. Over here, I have a meter to monitor the voltage, the AC voltage. I'm pulling just under 7 amps with everything going. The punch blocks that runs the AC only to run the filaments in the tubes is on this block. These blocks came off an old, I believe a Sigma transmitter. This is another block to run the DC, the 280 volts DC, and also the 380 DC that runs the high voltage system for the camera. Over here, this is the back of it. The two power supplies. This is the back of the prog amp. I'm running several fans to keep the prog amp cool because the way the design is, a lot of heat built up in this section. It caused me a lot of problems. So ever since I put the fans in, I never had a problem, any more problems out of the prog amp. This is the back of the encoder. And up here you have the generators, the two generators, the TG2000 and the 1410. Now to the camera. I've done a lot of modifications. It's a little bit TK41A, TK41B, and a TK41C. It's a little bit of all three. When I first received this camera, this row of controls and this row of controls was, one was on this side and the other one was on the other side. So I done a modification. I built this chassis, which is normally on the C, a TK41C. And there's other modifications I have done. Before I bring up the beam or beam detector on the I/O tubes, be sure I have horizontal sweep and vertical sweep. If one of these are dead, this will come on and I can go ahead and troubleshoot and see why. And another thing that's good about this is see which, if the horizontal chassis or the vertical chassis went out. This blanking is for the Overscan Switch. And that's to let me know that I'm in Overscan or normal scan. Over here is the horizontal board, horizontal sweep board. And these are the horizontal output tubes and damper. This is the diodes to run the 1300 volt for the IO tubes. This is the minus 500 for the IO tubes. One other thing. This is the focus. I'm sorry, the iris control. And by turning this knob here, this one here, this actually will control the iris in sync. I don't know if you can see the worm gear moving, but that's what that is for. On the other side of the camera, let's see if I can swing it around. Okay, the other side, just a moment. See if this stays put. Okay, the other side, this is the blue image orthicon tube with the yoke assembly. This is a vertical sweep side. With this open, this is the other side of the optical block. And this is electronics for the vertical sweep. Up here are the, this one's from the blue amplifier for the image replica tube, and this is the green in the center. Up above is the viewfinder here. And this side is the video side, video processing. And this side is the vertical and horizontal sweep side. The flyback is nestled right in that area. And basically, I had a lot of problems. A lot of engineers told me that my main problem was going to be the encoder. This is the encoder. But actually, I had a lot of problems with the proc amp, which is this. The encoder came out pretty good with no problems. A few capacitors that were changed. It's held up pretty good. And that was, this whole system's been working for at least 3 years now with no problem. The proc amp had several problems with tubes and resistors and capacitors and bad solder joints. So this taking a lot of work, this particular unit. I'm going to bring up, I'll set this down a second. I'm going to bring up the target for each color. Oh, and also I've done a quick registration of the camera. So it may not look that good, but it'll be okay for this presentation. I'm going to swing it around. This is over in this area here is my my little stage setup quickly. This is out of my pantry. So let's see how this looks. Again, I had to put the camera down. Hang on. Okay. Turn down the video a bit. Okay, and this is the color. Wait, let me get this out of the way. And this is the color with a quick registration. This is the way it looks like. There are some glitching in the system a bit. Okay, that's good. Okay, and this is the picture that it produced with a quick registration. And this is on the other monitor. It's a bit of a glare. So that's basically it. A lot of wiring had to be done on this. Oh, there's one other thing I forgot to show you. This camera is a one cable camera, and there's a lot of mismatch when I was wiring this unit. The I/O control board is a 3 cable unit, but the camera itself, as you can see, is a 1 cable unit. And what I had to do is actually, I call it serial going back to parallel. I actually had to make a box that converts the single cable into a three cable. And that's taken a lot of paperwork to get the correct wires in the right place. And it's full with IOs. It had to be 0 mistakes on this when this was built. So that's how I kind of got around that. And the board, the control board is easy to pull out. Also, there's enough cable here to where it's easy to pull out without bunching up and stuff. And basically, that's it. Here it is with the parade, the RGB parade. And let me move the camera because you can't read this on too long. I don't have an optical lens on this to prevent burn-in. So I kind of have to move the camera back and forth so I don't have burn-in onto the image orthicon tubes. Quick look at my shop or my lab. I do a lot of microwave satellite HPA work, and here's my equipment spectrum analyzer and all an RF generator. I do have an old 11, and it does work. There are some modifications after this, and also I have the support equipment as you can see back there. And this is a 14 by 19 room. I have 3 quads in this little house. This is the 600. This is the BBH 1-inch, BBH 2000 1-inch machine. Quad machine sitting here, RCA TR 600. Over here is the famous AVR1. It's still in process to get it built and running. And also I have a very, very rare VR 1002, all vacuum tubes. I do have 2 heads for this. Hopefully they're good. Right here. Haven't been tested yet. There's a lot of work has to be done and wiring and stuff. So one day I'll probably get it going. So basically, this is my shop in one little bitty house. It's kind of compact, but it kind of works out okay. So that's my presentation. Well,
Charlene, thank you very much. We will let you go, and then next week, I'm sure there'll be tons of questions for you.
Okay, very good.
Thank you very much. It was
You're welcome.
Really good.
You're welcome. Okay, good. Good night, y'all. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, that's pretty amazing, isn't it?
World's coolest basement.
Yeah, right.
No kidding, huh? And very impressive work. I'm amazed no one's heard of her before. You know, in this community, we're not a very big community. I'm quite impressed.
Yeah, I am too.
She's brilliant.
Surprising.
She's brilliant.
She told me that that she is a very, very private person. I had to sort of twist her arm a little bit to get her to do a presentation because she was afraid she wasn't going to do a good one. So, but it was great. Okay, well, let's start at the beginning then. Welcome everybody. Let's have anybody who is new for the first time to the meeting, if would like to introduce themselves, tell us who you are.
Richard Brewster right here. I thought this whole thing was absolutely fascinating. And let me ask you, is she any relation to Dave Johnson?
I don't believe so.
How strange.
Anyone else?
I'm Stefan Demos, and I've been out to the museum, but this is my first time attending online, and I intend to be a fixture here. Very interesting, and this presentation was just outstanding.
I agree.
My name is Jaden Cerrone. I am new here as well. I also intend to be a fixture as well. It's amazing what it goes on here.
Guess I can introduce myself.
Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Jay Lichtenauer. I run Antioch Old Time Radio in Antioch, Illinois. And I stopped by the museum this summer, and I have done a ton of reading on TV, and yet I thought I knew quite a bit, and I discovered there's quite a bit I still don't know. And so, I mean, just about the history of it itself, never mind the technical. So it was a lot of fun. I spent a lot of time in the museum.
Great. Yeah, it's a bottomless pit. We keep uncovering things. Anyone else? Well, welcome everybody. I'm glad to see you as part of this community. Want to thank the New Jersey Antique Radio Club for sponsoring this and providing the Zoom feed for us. That's very, very helpful. Spend a couple of minutes talking about some things we have coming up at the museum. First thing is we are just in the process of scheduling another swap meet. It'll be October 23rd at the museum. We will not be an auction this time because we got rid of just about everything that we wanted to. And I think it's going to be from 10 to 2. We'll be sending out email notices, and it'll be on the website and our Facebook page. And there'll be notices on the other Facebook pages that we're members of, groups. And at the same time, I'm going to be starting another sweepstakes in the next couple of days. Details are murky right now, but I want to plan on having the drawing for the winner at the swap meet. So that should be in the hopes of it, attracting a few more people. I think we had about 50 people at the last one, which is certainly worth doing, and we'll keep doing it until as long as there's interest in it. And we do plan to do our convention next year, and probably the usual dates, the first week in May. We're just starting the planning for that. Otherwise, things are going along nicely, and we continue to get new memberships. We are, and we haven't gotten a lot of really interesting stuff in terms of donations. That's sort of tapered off because of COVID. We have several things that are promised to us that haven't been delivered yet. When they come in, we'll let you know about them. Any questions?
Yes, I think you sort of answered it. I was, but I would be very interested in hearing if we're assuming COVID keeps going along well, we'll be back to having our annual convention. I've much missed that. And are there plans to continue these virtual Zoom meetings even when we are back to normal? Because it's awfully nice to be able to connect with the museum on a more regular basis.
Right. I think, yes, we will continue the Zoom meetings. There seems to be a lot of interest in it. And even if we don't have a presentation, you know, our general discussions are usually pretty interesting and animated. So yeah, we'll continue this. Assuming that COVID has not gotten terrible, we will have the convention. We're hoping that things will settle down by then, but we'll just have to see. And you remind me, I should announce our 2 board members. As many of you know, we had an election to replace 2 of our board members that are no longer with us. And Matt happens to be one of the new members. Blake Hinkle is the other, and I don't know if he's on tonight or not. But so we have 2 new younger board members, which is nice because the rest of us are getting pretty old, and so new blood is really going to be helpful. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question. I've been away for a while. How is the CRT rebuilding operation going? I never picked up in about a year on its progress.
Well, some time ago, you may know that we decided that it wasn't practical to do it at the museum, mainly because of management problems. Nobody came forward to run the operation, and it's complicated. It's running a business, and nobody stepped forward to do it. So without that, we really couldn't proceed. So Nick I think he lives in Maryland, bought a bunch of rebuilding equipment and is planning to rebuild tubes at some point. I haven't had a recent progress report from him. Dave, do you know any more?
I have not spoken to him recently. I know that he's about 90% constructed, and I think he wants to build an oven that'll hold a 30-inch tube, but I don't think he's done that yet.
So hopefully that'll happen.
He's also been experimenting with the electron array machining to try to rebuild the guns, and he's been trying to build electron, I forget the term, but he's been trying to build a trailer trash do-it-yourself electron erosion machine.
I think you're referring to an EDM, or electric discharge machining device.
Yes.
So that's all we know now.
Yes, is the on the rebuilding process, is that going to include color tubes as well?
Well, yes. There's not really much difference other than the 3 guns in a color tube. With the part we're doing, we're not rephosphoring. All we're doing is using existing shell and phosphor. So the plan is to do, the original impetus for this, I think, was to do 15 GP22s that are, there are lots of 15-inch, especially CT100s out there, and not very many good tubes. One was successfully rebuilt in France, and so there's no reason why they can't be done. And I think Nick's goal is to eventually rebuild them and rebuild the 21-inch round tubes.
Hey, Steve, I've got a question. There in rebuilding the tubes, as you may or may not know, when I was in high school, I worked in a tube rebuilding plant here in Knoxville. But that was back when supplies were available. And our equipment there was old from like the early 50s, but it was built like a Mack truck. And I sure wish I'd saved that stuff when I had the chance, but I never thought much about it. But the main thing in building a tube is getting supplies. We used to get our gun mounts from Superior Tube Company. And is there anybody that's manufacturing tube mounts with a button on the bottom of them? That's kind of the heart of it, and having a good lathe that you can put it in there to anneal the button to the glass tube. Or what about supplies and glass tubing? And glass tubing can be no problem.
All of that is no problem. The equipment is no problem. We have everything. We have it at the museum, and we've rebuilt tubes there. And Nick has everything except, as Dave mentioned, he still has to finish building an oven, which is not rocket science. The question of supplies comes down to can we rebuild guns, put new cathodes in guns? Do we have to have new? Well, it's been done, and that's what Rax was doing.
Seems like that'd be a lot of work. It'd be easier to build a whole brand new gun mount.
Well,
I never.
We don't know
really
yet. We don't know yet, but that's the hardest part, is having a replacement gun.
So I can speak a little bit to that. There is a company in India that is still manufacturing the electron guns themselves, the cathodes. We've been in contact with them before. They still seem to be able to supply the parts. There are a number of technical challenges associated with physically cutting apart the rest of the electron gun to separate out the cathode and then welding in a new one. I've been dabbling on that half of it as well. I've actually invested in a micro spot welding setup to attempt this. Steve had kindly some years ago given me a whole box of dead guns to play around with. Some of them, it's pretty easy to drill out the existing welds and take them apart, and others not. So that is absolutely an outstanding issue. That said, last I knew, we still had a small stock of new old stock guns at the museum that we could at least use for a while to rebuild some tubes.
Yeah, and a bigger stock of some guns than others. We have several hundred altogether.
Also, Steve, I was going to say that we didn't know. I think it was a surprise to all of us when we found out. I guess it was a year and a half ago or so, that there is still one place rebuilding CRTs. There's a guy in Germany who's rebuilding the CRTs. Now, I have not spoken with him, but I know a couple people who have done business with him, and I think Chuck Azar knows one of the guys too. And he either has a good inventory or he's got a supply because he offers this service on an ongoing basis yet.
Do recall that this was a fairly common process in the 50s and 60s. So there is new old stock out there of guns. I mean, you could buy them in quantity. They were not nearly as common as, common receiving tubes, vacuum tubes, but they are out there. So there is some old stock it's just going to depend how much demand there really is and how quickly we deplete that and whether we can find any more of it, in the meantime. Assuming we could continue to source the cathodes, I have a reasonable confidence that we could rebuild the guns with sufficient effort. And I have talked to Nick previously about possibly doing some of the gun rebuilding myself if he could do the rest of the tubes. But again, as we talked about this for the last 5 or more years, we just sort of need to get the ball rolling and prove there's demand and get some tubes rebuilt in order to start the industry back up again, so to speak, and sort of try to solve some of these problems as they come up. So I think at this point, as Steve said, all eyes are pretty much on Nick to get the first U.S. plant back again in reasonably short order.
I would think that the difficult part would be, see, the gun mounts are all put together with spot welding, and they're made out of stainless steel, I would think it would be difficult to drill on those things. So I've never seen that attempted. Of course, we didn't do that back there in the 60s, but I'd like to see that done.
They're typically nickel, actually, which is quite a bit softer than stainless steel. And I've had good luck with to cut into that type of work with a carbide burr on a high speed tool, sort of like a professional version of a Dremel. But again, this is I think this is all stuff that we can work on. There was a company, Southwest Vacuum, back in still went out of business sometime around the same time as Hawkeye, about 2009 or so, that did do this as a service, rebuild electron guns. So it is possible to do, but again, I think that the first step is to just get tube rebuilding going again and go from there.
What about alignment? Alignment of the gun parts and stuff. When you drill them, because they're put together. I remember they used to have women that would assemble those things, and
that's very correct. It is quite precise. The lucky thing is that the critical alignment is of the electron optics that come after the cathode. So if you access the cathode from the back of the gun assembly, so remove the wires, the nickel connections between the button and the back of the gun, and then remove the cathode and replace it, you can at least in principle do that without taking apart the critical aligned sections of the gun. The aperture in G1 is what's defining that beam. The electrons coming off the cathode as a cloud is not a terribly critically aligned anything.
Well, not only alignment, a lot of times the guns will have been tried to be rejuvenated and the grid may be blown away as far as that aperture, and you're going to have to do something about that too.
Obviously, not all guns will be rebuildable.
Right. Yeah. But most of them will have been, everybody will have tried everything before they get to that point.
And good point. I mean, these are all challenges. I don't have a super easy answer for that. Besides that, as I said, I know this process has been successfully completed before. And honestly, even if we had to have some G1 pieces made, which are at the end of the day a piece of nickel with a hole in them, that sounds a lot easier to have fabricated than the cathode itself, which is a really tricky device.
Yes,
I would think that the main guns that they would want to build would be like the Delta guns in your 25-inch colors. Of course, your round tube, 21-inch. And it used basically the same gun mount that a 15 GP did, basically. And then you have your black and whites, like your 21 AP4s or something like that. That fit about 90% of all of the 50s black and white tubes. So if they stuck to those three, I think they could probably perfect a process there. But back in my day, these parts were available. We never thought about, stuff like that. But it's getting more interesting to see what they can do, and it remains to be seen.
I will say that I have quite a number of times now had small runs of precision or semi-precision mechanical parts made in China. I've got contacts that can do that. So if we need something like a little nickel disc or in the right shape, I can have that made, or we can have that made. Again, the key, really critical component is that cathode. We're very lucky that Glowtronics appears to still be manufacturing them. Very specialized, vapor deposition and very high purity chemistry goes into making that, which is really the sort of heart and soul of the whole gun and the whole tube. But yeah, I mean, I'll, at the risk of repeating myself, I really. We have some stock of guns, and I think that there's enough demand at this point that we're the best thing to do is to see if Nick can get this up and running and actually start doing some tubes. And if we've got some momentum behind it, I suspect it'll be a a little bit easier to solve some of these problems, because right now, it's easy to talk about, how we might rebuild the guns, but until we can put the new gun into the tube and have actually sort of gotten the whole thing set up, we can't even really try it. So that's sort of been the sticking point for quite some time.
Is the cathode material or the amount of cathode material critical? In other words, there are still people who are making conventional tubes that have cathodes in them. But do we need a lot more in an electron gun of that material than you would be in a conventional tube?
So the cathodes are larger, do have a higher, they're rated for a higher electron current than in a receiving tube. So that's true, but it's mostly that the geometry of it is very different. If you think about the structure of a traditional pentode, the cathode is a long, basically wire tube up the middle, where in a CRT, it's a little button that is designed to shoot at the end.
Okay.
I remember one of the most critical processes that we did in building the tube. Early on, when I went to work for Paul Mercer, our tubes were a little bit soft. And he had a guy that came down from New York, I think. I think it was one of GE plants up there. And he sat down with Paul one day. He says, now I want to hear everything you do and don't leave out anything exactly. But one of the most critical things of building a good tube was when you crack the tube there, you let it down to nitrogen. You don't just let it sit in a rack there and go down by itself, because it'll inhale moisture. And moisture is poison on your faceplate. And if you let a little bit of moisture in it, it doesn't have to be much, just a little bit in there, you'd see it in your faceplate after you built your tube. You'd have imperfections in it. And I remember some round tubes that we used to do, the 21-inch. The center of the tube, there'd be about a 9-inch diameter stain in the tube there from moisture that had found its way into it. And we determined that's what it was. But when we'd crack them there, we'd put like a black trash bag or something like that around it. We had these big cylinders of nitrogen, and we'd let them down to nitrogen. And I think that improved about 85 to 90% of our tube quality there in doing just that before you even started. And of course, you want to scrub we had a wash rack there, and it'd be on some 2x4s there, a special sink that we built. We'd throw the tube up on there, and they had some, I forget what kind of cleaner we used, but it was a little caustic, and take all the old dag off of it, because you want to remove all the dag on a tube before you build it. And then after we got it clean, then it would, after it was dried off, it would sit in a rack, and we'd crack it and then tape a trash bag around the tube and let it down to nitrogen. That improved the quality, and that was an important part in case anybody has never discovered that yet. But anyway,
I had found a patent online where somebody patented the process that when they cracked the tube, they actually put nitrogen up the neck, and they weren't even baking.
What we did.
Yeah, they weren't baking it out afterwards. They said they didn't need to do the bake out.
Do you recall if these were aluminized or non-aluminized tubes that you were seeing this effect with?
What, me?
Yeah.
We did both in the aluminized ones. I remember we had another guy that liked to do the black and white tubes there so much, and I didn't pay too much attention to it. But I do remember that when we would put some new glass on the neck of the tube to extend it out so that we had a vertical lathe that would do it, we'd have this special little paintbrush, and we'd put dag, and we could paint in there to do that. And that's about all I remember doing it, because I was more interested in the color tubes than the black and whites.
Yeah, so I believe that the non-aluminized black and white tubes, which just have bare phosphor on the face, are going to be less susceptible. That face is going to be a lot less susceptible to damage than either an aluminized one or certainly a color tube, which might explain why.
I agree with that.
Yeah, why you might have seen this effect, and we maybe hadn't encountered it, given that most of the tubes that we've attempted so far have been of that very earliest variety.
I have a comment on those cathodes you're talking about. A good source of them could be used in electron microscopes. They're
they come up on a little pedestal, and they're relatively inexpensive, and normally they're mounted all reproducibly, so you can drop them right into your electron microscope, and then there's usually a screw adjustment for adjusting their location within the electron microscope. But they're also a source of apertures too, if you need them. I don't know what voltage they run at, but might look into that.
Unfortunately, we have looked into that. And unfortunately, the guns used in electron microscopy are all thoriated tungsten filaments, because naturally in an electron microscope, you have to be able to bring the chamber back up to atmospheric pressure, which would destroy an oxide cathode, which is what the kind that's used in a picture tube. But very good thought. It's very unfortunate that doesn't work.
Okay, let me take a break from this. We'll come back to a general discussion. Larry, are you there? Larry, are you there?
He's there. He's showing himself there at the museum there. I don't think he has sound yet.
He's muted.
Dave, you can't unmute him, can you?
I can't, but I can put his video on, but I'm looking for it. Which one is Larry?
I see him there.
Well, I'm just looking down the list of names.
He's Samsung.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Gotcha.
There he is.
There you go.
Okay. Tonight I'm going to just spend a few minutes talking about just one item because we had a presentation, and then after that we'll get back to an open discussion of whatever else, if you want to continue the rebuilding topic or whatever else is on your mind. Larry, are you at the Cuba? There it is. Most of you have seen this set. It sort of has gotten a lot of attention, especially you see on the Facebook groups recently, all kinds of people commenting about them. We got ours many years ago from a guy in Toronto. And this is they made the set from 1957 to 62. This one was the last version, the 1962 version. They're pretty much the same over those years. And you can see it's huge. And allegedly, that the sail can be oriented to point the screen wherever you want. Well, that's not easy to do. It's pretty rough. And I'm not sure anybody actually did that, but nobody knows how many of these were made. There are a number in the US, and I'm speculating that the reason was that US servicemen thought they were cool and bought them when they were stationed in Germany and had them shipped over, because there are probably 10 of them at least in the US. And they had different electronics. Some of them had tape record. You could order them with tape recorders or even wire recorders in the earlier versions. And they had a multiband radio in addition. The thing that struck me about this set is, despite the fancy cabinet, it's pretty low end in terms of audio quality. It's got, I don't know how many speakers. Larry, show the holes in the back. This one is missing its speakers, but you can see all the holes for speakers. And I can't remember the wattage of the amplifier, but it's not much. I think it's like 10 watts a channel. And the TV set is no great set either. So they really spent all their money on the woodwork, which of course I guess at that time in Germany was pretty cheap. It sold for about $1,200 US. So it was an expensive set. We haven't restored this. I'm sure it's 625 line, 220 volt, which is not an issue. You just use a step-up transformer most likely. And they made it with in all kinds of different versions with different storage shelves. And if you look at Kuba's catalog, they had a whole line of sets. This was probably 10 different models. It's on our website. And this was the most elaborate. The others were more just sort of like 50s and 60s modern rectangular sets. This is the only one that had the crazy design. But that set attracts a lot of attention for people going through the museum. One of our later tours, when we don't have a presentation, this set is in our British and European room, and we have a good collection of British sets, and including some really fancy ones, and some French sets. Can't remember what else. German, I think. So we will we'll cover them in another session. Anybody have any questions or comments about the Kuba?
Very interesting. Thank you, Steve. Do you know if they were only made in 625 line for Germany, or were there export versions as well?
I don't know. I suspect they were only made for 625 lines.
I posted a link that has more information on those sets on the chat page, on the chat side.
Excellent.
Would it be okay if I continue with the 625 line sets, because I have a little presentation prepared for you? It won't take long, but it might interest you.
Go right ahead.
Okay, my name is Gerhard Bauer. I am a long-standing member of the museum. As you may recall from my name, that I was originally born in Austria. I grew up there, and then later on, my profession, I'm a professor of hematology oncology, took me to the United States. I've been here for 40-something years. And however, I am also an engineer. And I love restoring radios and television sets. And when my parents passed away and I had to take some of the possessions from my youth with me, I brought over the television set that I grew up with, which is a 1957 Philips knockoff that was made in Austria, which is called Horniphone, which is not what you think it is. And it's actually a Hungarian name. Horny is a Hungarian name. And the company itself in Vienna was affiliated with Philips and made the Philips sets under their own name. So there is an interesting thing on Zoom, where is an artist's rendering, as you may remember, that shows a television, like a little television. And you think that was just a thought up television set? No, it's not. It's my TV. It's here. So I'm going to take the camera and I'm going to show you, because it's on, it's fully restored. I did the whole restoration on that. It took me 3 years to restore that. It's fully recapped, and all of the resistors have been replaced. Here you can see the flicker. Do you see that? You see that? It runs on 25 frames per second, 50 fields, and 625 lines. And it's fully restored, and it's absolutely producing a wonderful image. I actually built a power supply that is necessary because you're running at 25 frames per second. You need to run it at 50 hertz. So I had to build myself an inverter and run the inverter on 12 volts DC, a big power supply. So I get true 220 volts, 50 hertz into that machine here. So, but you can see here, if you look very carefully, that's exactly the television set that's on Zoom. It's a 21-incher, and it has exactly that here, except they got the knobs wrong. they found my picture of that television on the internet, and they admitted that they were actually drawing it from that. It seems to be the only TV that we have of that kind in the United States. So I run it from a nice little blonder tong here. And that's, as you can see down here, that's a modulator. And I found the PAL version of that, took me a long time. And I run it through a converter from 525 to 625, but I have also multi-standard DVD machines that can run 625, and that's really the beauty of that system. The 625 line system was way before PAL. This was CCIR. And interestingly, on that television set in Austria, there are several channels that are not common. Normally, on the CCIR system, there's channel 2, 3, 4 on the 47 megahertz range up to 50 megahertz. And then you go into the other one, 100 and something megahertz, range 5 to 11. That's the rest. And you don't have 13 channels because the bandwidth is larger. You have 5 megahertz bandwidth of modulated signal, and then you space it out, and you have in the 6.5 megahertz range, you have above, you have the audio carrier. So it takes up more space in a 625 line system. However, PAL was not available until 1967 in Germany and 1969 in Austria. So CCIR was the first one. From 1950 on, it was actually something that Philips fought because they had a different system that they wanted the world to take over. And finally, the 625 line system took over in most countries, also in the Eastern Bloc, but with another audio carrier spacing, because they didn't want the Western programs to be able to be heard and seen on Eastern television sets. So as you can see, this was quite a project to restore that. It took me 3 years, and finally the thing is working properly. Don't ask me if my high voltage transformer goes, if that flyback goes, I don't know what to do. I'll have to have it rewound or something like that, because that is not available anywhere. So just a little thing for you to enjoy and see that the zoom picture that's in there is really shaped after a real television set.
Thank you, Gerhard. That was very interesting.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I was actually, I'm embarrassed to admit, not aware that the 625 line black and white standard in Germany was separate and, I guess you said, unrelated to the later Trans-Europe PAL standard.
Well, first of all, the PAL standard is a very interesting beast because you have the same conundrum between the intercarrier that is being modulated on, plus the line frequency and all of that, and you can't really run 2550 anymore. So it's a little bit of a different frequency, and then they didn't know exactly how to really modulate the PAL system onto that carrier without having a lot of interference. So also there had to be something that was very important to introduce, because in the beginning they didn't have a delay line in the PAL. If you remember that the PAL system works like this, you have the blue and the red signal going separately in cross modulation, quadrature modulation. And what you happen is you switch the phase from 180 degree to 0, 180 to 0 in a specified way. So you get half the resolution of color in one color. And nobody realizes that because the resolution in color is very low anyway. However, it causes an interference. And when you look without a delay line onto a PAL system that has these switches between these phases in color, you can actually see a color crawl in the line. And so they had to bring a delay line in so that you delay the 0 degree signal with the 180 degree signal, mix it, and then output it on the screen, which gives you a delay of 1 line, and nobody realized that there was a 1 line delay anyway in there. That was, however, it caused a good amount of problems in making delay lines. And first in the beginning, they had a very long glass ultrasound delay line of that length that was finally broken up in a smaller one where it got reflected all the way down. And that delay line was in the first television sets and was very fragile because all made of glass. And so it was very interesting to see these first color television sets with these long delay lines. This was an integral part of the PAL system at that time.
You know what, you mentioned PAL. We made a conversion unit to convert PAL to NTSC for VCR. And what we did was we threw away that extra line.
Exactly.
And used the delay line to do the previous line in color. And it was the same loss of color resolution, but it didn't require any transcoding.
I think that's a very smart idea, and most people would not even realize that you lose a line. And often the color is still, the color resolution is not even very good when it goes into the signal and it's mixed down. So thank you for your attention on that. I really appreciate that.
Gerhard, this is Mark out in Seattle. I have a friend who is of Hungarian descent. Matthew would know him as Adam. When I mentioned we were looking at a Hungarian TV set, I believe you said, he asked me to find out the manufacturer name.
It's Hornyphone, made in Vienna, Austria. And interestingly, before World War I, Austria and Hungary was one country. So
the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Yeah, I remember
absolutely.
that from school.
And
yeah.
That gentleman who was from Hungary formed that electronics company in Vienna, Austria, and stayed there. And they had a coalition practically with Philips. So Philips sent them all of their chassis and everything. And they only built a little housing that looked a little different as compared to the Philips. If you look at this, this is a Philips set on the inside, totally in every aspect. Interestingly, this is also a set that is DC coupled. So there's no black or DC restoration in there. It's DC coupled. Interestingly, after the demodulator, which is done with germanium diodes.
Huh.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I missed the first syllable of it was something phone.
Horny, Horny, horny phone.
Thank you. And what was the circa? I think you mentioned it, but I forgot. What
1957.
Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Very nice presentation. Excellent.
That I got this running is a miracle anyway. So
that's part of my congratulations. Well done. Thank you for the presentation. Very interesting.
Absolutely spectacular work. I've only done one foreign set. That was a 1959 British 405 liner, and took me the better part of a year to get that thing going, despite no major problems with the CRT or flyback. Major respect.
Thank you. As I said, I will need all of your help when that flyback goes, because that will have to be rewound, and I can use every bit of help from you when this happens.
Anybody else have comments more in a different topic, this topic?
Gerhard, maybe you would know. How many different number of line systems were there in Europe before PAL was made universal there?
Yeah, very good question. France had the 800 and something line system. That was a wonderful system, and very few sets were actually made. And this was high definition by all means, but I think it was 14 megahertz that it needed a channel, and nobody could allocate so much frequency for television. So that was abandoned, and they all moved over to 625. But this was the best television system already in the 50s and 60s. It was high definition, and we have to give them a lot of credit for doing that. Then, of course, the 405 line system that the British used starting already in 1936 with regular television. It was since 1935, it had been operated by EMI, and Baird was not able to do that with the mechanical system, of course. And EMI had a lot of trouble with the 405 line system. And even when they presented it in the beginning, it didn't work right. But there was a lot of line pairing in the receivers, because the interlacing didn't work too well with the system that they came up with. And so often the resolution was not as high as they expected, but that was worked out in the long run. Then 375 lines, I think, was something like that, was around. And then the Germans had all types of systems, starting out from the mechanical system. They started 30 lines with the horizontal scanning, which really came from the Baird system, because Fernseh AG, or Television AG, they were in alignment with the Baird company, and Baird wanted to do vertical scanning in the UK and horizontal scanning in Germany so that they wouldn't compete against each other. And so that was scaled up to 60 lines. 60 lines was scaled up to 90 lines. You see always the 30 line increment, 120 lines, and then they went to 180 lines, and then they went to 240 lines. And this was almost impossible to do mechanically. And then all kinds of things happened with electronic scanning. They didn't have access to iconoscopes for the longest time in Germany. So they wanted to get to the 441 line system. And interestingly, they copied that from RCA, the 441 line system, which was on 30 hertz. We in Germany had it on 25. So they were lucky with getting a little bit lower frequency band and getting high resolution still. But they did not have iconoscopes at that particular time, although they traded with RCA, I think 2 or 3 iconoscopes that they used in 1936 for the Olympic Games. And that standard was also not standardized. The Olympic Games were transmitted in 180 lines in most of the time. And then they also had the experimental 441 line system up and running, which didn't go very well at that time. So they also had Farnsworth tubes for the image dissector tubes for the the film system that they had, where they filmed something and then they scanned it with the image dissector with good quality, and that was only 180 lines. So after 1937, they switched over permanently to 441 lines, and that went up to 1945, and then it was over. And the Philips system, I think, was then over 500 and something lines, I believe, or something like that. I don't know the exact line number. That was long used in the Netherlands for very nice demonstration, but they didn't have a regular program on this standard. And Philips, with the Standards Commission, when they, after the war, wanted to put the standards out for discussion, they really plugged very well for their own standard and almost succeeded. But the 625 line standard was then taken over. Nice thing was they could use very similar bandwidth as in the United States because they were only at 25 frames, 50 fields. And so the 5 megahertz bandwidth worked really well for that European system, which was the standard then for many, many years. And except the Eastern Bloc, really, they used 625, as I said before, but the spacing to the sound carrier was different. And they took advantage of that spacing because they actually increased the video frequency band 0.5 megahertz.
Thank you very much. That's the most comprehensive discussion I have heard to date on the varying standards in Germany. I had tried to piece that together at one point with limited success. Fascinating. You should consider writing that history down. Having done the research to get it all straight.
You know, I have done a lot of research on that, and I have actually all the material to back it up. And my father was an engineer, and he took an Fernmeldi course, as it was called, a television, radio, and telephone course. And that at that time at the university, because he was a soldier and he could only do that by mail at that time. Nowadays we do it online, and in the old days it was a correspondence course. And he left me all his material that he has. It's all in there. So
yes,
that's why
I think a large COVID virtual round of applause for Gerhard.
Thank you.
Outstanding, especially just wow.
Thank you.
Danke.
You're welcome in English.
Ja, danke schön.
Gern geschehen auf Deutsch.
Wunderbar.
When did color come to Europe?
Came to the United Kingdom in the 1950s. The 405 line standard was adapted to NTSC color. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah. So TRK41s TK41s were sent to the BBC, and they had a demonstration program running after the regular 4 or 5 lines system was switched off in the middle of the night. And you could use an American color set and modify it for 405 lines, or vice versa. You could take a Philips set that they had actually built for the United States and modify that for 405 lines. The problem is the flyback and the high voltage. Because with the 10 kilohertz, you can't get that high voltage up the way you want it. So your flyback has to be like that massive. And they did it. So there were systems, there was television sets produced for the 405 line system with NTSC. I didn't know what the subcarrier frequency was. It escaped me. I knew that once, but it escaped me. It's very low. And you had quite a grid in the image on the black and white screen that you could clearly see. But what I was told was that the 405 line NTSC color was excellent. And they did a lot of demonstrations with the 405 line color. And then they decided not to move forward because there were some very heated debates in Europe at that time to give color to the 625 line system, because they said, we want to take over NTSC right away and adapt it to 625 lines. And then the Germans came and said, it won't work for us. It won't work. We can't do this to the public because the color is never the same. Don't you know that NTSC stands for never the same color? So it was all overblown, of course. You know, what really was happening is because of the mountainous regions in the south of Germany and all the way in the west of Austria, they had a lot of reflections. And their phase issues would come in, and there would be interference in the phase carrier and in the color carrier and phase, and you could get wrong color. So there was really very strong debate. And this is why color didn't come to Europe so fast, because they wanted to develop a different system. So a color stable system. And there was only with PAL phase alternating lines. It was developed by Telefunken, supposedly by Walter Bruch. I'm very good friends with his son. And we have had a lot of discussion about that, of if it was really his father. And his father did make a lot of contributions, but his lab did most of the work. So it's the usual thing, you know, you're the principal lab guy and you put people to work and they do all the work for you, and then you do all the patenting and everything. So it's a bit murky how this actually really came about. But the French didn't like it at all, because they didn't want to have to take over a German system like they would have been taken over again by the Germans, and they absolutely resisted that. And so they came up with the CCAM system, which is an inferior system to PAL, by all means, because PAL was certainly only a little bit of an improvement. I wouldn't even say improvement, a modification of NTSC to make it more phase stable. That's all it is. But CCAM is completely different, because your color carrier comes sequentially transmitted. The red and the blue gets sequentially transmitted from line to line. It changes, and then you have to store each line, and everything gets really only, there's a lot of interference because of the frequency modulation that you use on the sequential colors. So black and white images in the French system don't look as good as NTSC or PAL's black and white. So, but this is the reason. And then SECAM didn't take off because this was the only country in Europe that used a different color system. All the other countries used the same color system as PAL. And they started with that, but 65, 66, and by 67, countries switched over to PAL, and by 69, everybody had PAL, most everybody. So the French lobbied the Eastern Bloc, and they had years and years of discussions with that.
There was another problem with the CCAM system, and that was you couldn't switch it. And
Absolutely.
everything had to be done in PAL.
Yep.
They would, all their production was in PAL, and then converted to NTSC. What?
The color system was FM. You could not run it through a video switcher.
No, you cannot. You have to have a certain, a separate decoder for that. So you have to extract the system separately, and you have to FM demodulate it.
Well,
and that's what it is.
Thompson was making a real push to get CCAM 60 into South America for quite a few years.
Yeah, but let me tell you more. Russia and the whole Eastern Bloc listened to France and took it all over, of course, you know, again, so that the others in the eastern part can't really see the color television from the west.
What was France on in 1967? Because I saw French television at the Montreal World's Fair, Expo 67, and it was spectacular. I had been used to looking at American color TV since '62, and the French system was far superior.
Yeah, because of the 625 lines that they used at that time, and also CCAM was just making it start at that time.
But was that CCAM or palette?
No, CCAM. The French never, ever. This would be an insult to them if they would have needed to use palette.
Okay.
I remember when I worked at RCA that we had to develop a CCAM encoder for the TK76, and everybody was just, you know, sort of, you know, grimacing at the idea. And I heard that the CCAM was System Extraordinaire Contraire Américain.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I tell you something, I compared all of them. I saw all of them. If we would have had NTSC and 625, it would have been superior to everything else, because the color purity is unbeatable in NTSC. You don't switch your lines in phase, you don't mix your lines, you don't get a mixed color, you get a correct color. And NTSC in the beginning, how they actually really scheduled when certain colors would drop off at what frequency. This was so well thought out, and I give them so much credit for that. The NTSC flag, remember that, shows you exactly that, which colors at which frequency would drop off.
That was a Hazeltine development.
Yes, yeah. But in the beginning, of course, it didn't work so well because the circuits were not so beautifully constructed as later on. It took them a few years to perfect that. But the system itself, to make a black and white compatible color system, it's just beyond me how they could think that up.
Yeah, that's another thing I was going to mention, is that they were able to make the color system match with the black and white system, so everybody could see it, no matter what TV set you had, black and white or color. So
absolutely.
it's just
if
amazing.
you also follow the CBS color television development by Goldmark. So that was really started in 1938, going then into the early 1940s, and it was beautifully developed by that time. But you know what? It would have been a very colorful albatross, if you ask me, with the 405 line system, what 144 fields, I think, and nobody would be able to watch that anywhere except on a specially bought CBS color television set. I'm not sure. And then with the resolution of 405 lines, you know, I'm not sure that people would have really embraced that. I think it was the right decision to go to a black and white compatible color system.
Going back to the 405 line NTSC set system, there is at least one surviving set. Guy named David Boynes, a major collector in England. I don't know if he's still around. I haven't heard from him in years, but he got one made by Pi, had a 21AXP22 in it, and restored it. He built his own signal source, only as far as he just really, the signal source was a color bar generator, but he got it working. So that set is still around somewhere, and there are probably others.
Yep. I think it's very interesting. This is among the most fascinating color experiments out there.
There was also the Hazeltine work around 1950, and they actually developed phase alternating line, phase, and it was done. And it's really interesting. We had discussions on this at the ETF some years ago. Eldray Tan sent me the original Hazeltine designs. You know, they were
Judge, you're breaking up.
Developing designs for television manufacturers. They were a licenser. Oh,
Can
sorry
you
about
say
that.
that one more time? You were breaking up.
Okay, got it. Okay, I'll try it real brief. Hopefully it's coming through. But there was the phase alternation was done, and it was done both by RCA and Hazeltine.
Yeah.
And then they dropped the alternation and came out in 53 with the non-alternating version. The phase alternation was not done principally because of the color phase shift. They were worried about getting crosstalk between the color channels in quadrature, and that's all Hazeltine's Colorful Days.
Yeah,
and it goes through the whole thing.
So I tell you something. I'm not sure that Walter Bruch, who is supposedly inventing or had invented the PAL system, really came up with the idea on his own. I think he read all of the Hazeltine papers and all of that from the previous systems, and I think that was the main factor why he actually chose that.
I think that's true, and in fact, they alternated the same R-Y as they did in the original Hazeltine patents, and also Hazeltine's engineer wrote a paper in one issue of IEEE. PAL was described by Dr. Bruch, and then the very next issue that was the Hazeltine paper talking about how they had done all of those. But what had happened was in the 1960s, they had failed to keep up the patents. Hazeltine fell into financial problems and was not paying to upkeep the European patents on the phase alternation by Tel.
Yeah, so there you can see, it's really the hard work of the American engineers that put in all of that thinking, and you know what the exploitation is, and nowadays we have all of that exploitation in China.
You know, when the one line delay became available, there were some very odd proposals for systems that came out that I think were never actually developed. But one proposal I remember seeing was to alternate lines between an NTSC type carrier and a pure subcarrier wave. So you could put the subcarrier through the delay line and use it to demodulate the NTSC carrier. And then on the next line, you would be receiving the subcarrier and use it on a delayed chroma signal. I don't know what the advantage was supposed to be. I guess you could build a receiver without a color oscillator. But, you know, sometimes reality is stranger than fiction.
I know. I wanted to tell you some very interesting color experiments that the Germans did. In spite of, well, they didn't do it for a very long time, but because the war effort was really taken away from all of their experimentation because they had to use their cameras that they developed in their flying bombs, of course. So what they did was they did triple interlaced color. And they had red, green, and blue triple interlaced. And they were trying to come up with a very easy way of having stripes of color phosphor on the receiving tube. And then with the triple interlace, they would hit these particular stripes of color. And that was a very interesting aspect. However, that was not compatible with the system that they had developed, but it was just an attempt to use the triple interlace method to get to a color system.
I imagine that might have taken up quite a lot of bandwidth.
Interestingly, they would have gone to almost the same 140 something fields that the CBS color would go. So you're correct with the bandwidth.
I got a question. How do we talk so long about compatible color without mentioning RCA once?
I hope they did mention RCA somewhere in the beginning.
My only question now, Gerhard, is how much of this incredible detailed information that you passed on to us will we be responsible for in the final exam?
You're absolutely correct, because my students always fear me. I'm called Scary G, because I expect a lot from them. And if I want to have responsible doctors come out, they need to know these things, so.
It is more than clear that you are an academic and quite an accomplished one. I mean, seriously, to pass on information like that to an audience that understands, and your recall, and I'm already afraid. How much of my final grade will this be?
Well, when you come next time, you have to give a little presentation about what you know. How about that?
Oh no.
Not about my stuff, about your stuff.
Thank you again, Gerhard.
You're welcome.
Incredible.
Thank you.
If we could possibly move briefly across the Pacific to Japan for at least a quick show and tell of one of the rarest, or at least most historically interesting of the early Sony sets, I would be much obliged.
Go for it.
Can you, let's see, can I unmute myself here? I am unmuted. Okay. So I actually just got back from the big swap meet here in the Pacific Northwest in Chehalis, Washington, which is this year was a combination of the Puget Sound Antique Radio Association and the Northwest Vintage Radio Society. And at that event, I was extremely lucky to come into not one, but two Sony TV8 301 sets. This one, obviously, with the dead CRT as a parts unit. But the second one comes in the original carry case and has the original hood and the original Sony branded power cord. So really quite a scarce example. I have not attempted to power this on yet, but it is my first complete example of this rare set. But for those of you who are not aware, this was Sony's first television. So as a historical first, given that, at least in the much later decades, Sony became famous as the dominant player in television, consumer television, but also was the first direct view, meaning non-projection, transistorized television set ever made. Came out in early 1960. The first all transistor set, of course, was the Philco Safari, but due to the limitations in high current transistors needed for deflection, they kept a very narrow deflection angle and used a projection system to enlarge the image, which and similarly on the high voltage side for driving a larger tube. So this became the first direct view set, meaning you're looking directly at the face of the CRT. But from a broader historical sense, it was a very intelligent move for Sony when after the Second World War, when their early experiments in television came to an end, that they chose to adopt the United States television standard moving forward, and therefore their domestic market, the research and development done for improving television equipment for their domestic market could also be exported to the United States, which of course became their largest trading partner. Well, the rest is history. Not that there weren't PAL Trinitron sets later on. It certainly gave the Japanese and Sony in particular an early advantage in the United States. So I hope to give a more detailed presentation, including a working demonstration, when I finish recapping this one, and hopefully any of the Sony custom-made transistors which have failed, which this thing is full of, I will be able to pull from one of my two parts units that I've acquired over the year, one just now and the other one at the ETF auction in 2019. Thank you, Steve. So that's pretty much all I have to say on this, but I couldn't help, given the discussion today of foreign television and television standards, bring that into the mix.
Hey, Matthew, I'll just mention, if you feel like living on the edge, on the few of those sets that have come my way, it must have been a good year for capacitors, because if you tried to power that up, I would say that there's probably a good chance that it might work to some extent.
I was told when am I muted? I was told when I received it that it gave a raster but no video, and the raster was shrunken. So I would have to say that at least the initial evidence would point in that same direction. I'm not quite sure I'm that brave given the scarcity and value of that particular set, but perhaps another time.
They used a lot of germanium transistors in those sets.
Oh yeah. Sony made germanium transistors at that.
Yeah, and then they would deteriorate over age, whether you used them or not.
Yep, the unlike silicon, which has a native oxide, which protects the junction itself from contamination and degradation from atmospheric oxygen and water vapor, germanium transistors do not have an intrinsic oxide, and so they were always sealed, supposedly hermetically sealed in metal cans, but those seals were and remain imperfect, which causes them to degrade over time, unfortunately.
I saw something briefly this morning that I didn't know existed. This morning I was on a Zoom involving the 1967 World's Fair in Montreal, and it was some home movies, and there was a brief shot of a Sony picture phone in the Japan pavilion, and it used the portrait orientation of the CRT, the same as the Bell system picture phone. But from the shutter bars in the 8mm home movies, you could tell that they simply took an NTSC setup and rotated the whole thing 90 degrees, so that the slow scan direction was now horizontal and the scanning lines would have been vertical. So I never knew that that existed, but of course the Japanese companies did a lot of one-off things that they took all the way to final design and then never produced. But one of the things that gives away that being a one-off demo is that turning the scan 90 degrees is a bad idea, because your eyes naturally scan more quickly left to right than up and down, and you're constantly moving your eyes with the scan or against the scan, so you get flickering picture distortion if the slow scan is in the horizontal direction.
I want to give you one little thing about vertical scan, though, because Baird by purpose used vertical scan. And you know why? Because he wanted to get head and shoulders. If you do horizontal scan, you can't easily do that. But with vertical scan, you can extend to the same image as you will have now on your cell phone. And you get head and shoulders.
Yeah, when 16:9 first came out, that was a terrible thing in my estimation, because you did not want a wider picture, you wanted a taller picture. And you actually got a smaller picture because the vertical sweep was lower. So the images vertically were smaller in 16:9 than they were in 4:3. But as you see on television, they've taken advantage of it. There's usually 2 or 3 people with 2 or 3 different cameras on at the same time, which you can do good with 16:9.
You know, in cinematography theory, one of the things that they teach you about is how to get rid of the disadvantages of a too wide format. And the cinematographers learn to put subliminal frames in the picture. They'll have somebody standing next to a building or a doorway so that the outer parts of the picture are clearly not the important frame for the person.
Interesting.
As much as I would love to stay on, it's just about my dinner time here on the West Coast. Thank you so much to everyone. It's been really a truly fascinating discussion. And I look forward to hearing more about the color camera, especially.
You're muted, Matt.
Oh. Nat? Hello.
He doesn't
Well, I don't
hear
know if
us.
he's gone, but I wanted to congratulate him. It was nice to know that we have 2 new people on board now and bringing a lot of new information to our collective information.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm really honored to accept this position. Thank you all for your votes. It was a big responsibility and commitment on my part, but ETF has been a very important part of my life for a number of years now, and I really want to step up at this time and help continue its mission. So thank you for your trust in me.
We really appreciate that you're doing that, Matt.
Yes.
Hey, Steve, before you leave, tell me the dates for 2022 for the convention. Are you talking about 30 April, 1 May, or May 7, 8?
Don't know yet.
Oh.
I haven't investigated the availability of the Hilliard Center. As soon as I do that, we will start the ball rolling, let you know.
Thanks.
Hey, Steve, I have my eternal question, Mark again in Seattle. Is the city still after your building, or they kind of calmed down for a while, or?
Well, I haven't heard anything, and I didn't expect to. I think this is a very long-term process. And I don't know if it's going to go anywhere. So,
yeah.
But no, I have not heard anything more.
Good.
Hey, Steve, what is the status of the museum's TK41?
Let's see, I saw Barry, are you on?
There is a rumor to that effect, yes.
Okay, what can you tell us?
Well, as with everything else, COVID has slowed me down. You know, I was hoping to get some help with it. I have not solicited any because of the disease. What I've done so far, I think last time we discussed this, I had pulled out the optical systems for both cameras and decided they were both in various states of needing help, but I was going to proceed with the electronics. I've actually moved the museum's camera into my physical shop and staged it. It's not set up yet, but I hope within the next week or two to start cabling it up and seeing where we go from there. So electronically, I'm hoping something starts happening. What is this? This is late August already. Probably sometime next month, I will be able to get to trying to get signals of some kind through parts of it at least. Starting with power supplies, of course, but there's a lot of cabling that's going to need some attention. So that's where it is. I would love to get some local help, but I don't think with this new wave of COVID, it's the right time for that even yet.
For all of you up there in the West Coast up there, around Washington, have you ever heard of Norman Alquist up there or know of him?
Washington.
Yeah, Norman Alquist.
Well,
You
I'm in
ever heard
Ohio.
of him?
So no.
When back in the early 60s, when I lived up in Seattle, there was a guy named Norman Alquist. And at 14 years old, he designed and built his own television camera with an IO tube in it. He would take circuits out of RCA and GETMs there, and take the ones that he liked and built it. And actually, I have that camera. But Norman, I still keep up with him. And we were talking about building solid state CCU units for a TK41 to at least get them working. And I just wondered if anybody else has ever thought of this idea. But if anybody could design a system, it would be Norman Alquist up there.
Julian, hang on one sec. Larry M., can you mute your mic, please? You're really busting up the conversation.
Well, my understanding was that we were trying to restore the camera to as original as possible. You can always design new circuitry for something, but unless I'm mistaken, well, that's not my mandate at the moment.
Well, my idea was not to change, their originality. I was because there's more TK41 camera bodies around than there are CCU units. And the thought crossed my mind to fire one up. Norman and I talked about building something like that to at least use it, but unless we can find more TK41 control units, and they're massive because everybody threw them away there back in the late 60s and kept the lenses.
The museum's processor unit was tested by Jay Ballard up at his museum using his head. So at least, other than anything that went wrong in transport or since it's been sitting for a year since then, at least the processor is working. The encoder section, I powered up a year or two ago and it released some magic smoke. So I decided it really needs a complete teardown and rebuild because the chassis is pretty badly corroded and I don't trust any of the grounds. So while I was up at Jay's place, I also picked up a couple solid state encoders. So that's going to be the way I test it. And assuming we can get the optics working, the next step after that would be to tear the encoder down and rebuild it. But at least I have a 1 RU instead of a half rack encoder that I can work on getting the camera head itself functioning a little. We'll see how far that goes. So the processor was tested and working with Jay's system. I have an encoder I can use. My main concern right now, honestly, is the cables, the state of the connectors. I think when last time I checked into them, the cable jackets themselves are either falling apart or have fallen apart, but the internal cabling I think is sufficient to at least start with. So that's where I was with that. Now, as far as designing solid state replacement modules, if you will, I don't know what that would get us at the moment. It's the head that's the issue, not the electronics right now. But it's a great idea. I mean, if you want to put the time into it later, the museum actually has a second head. Steve, do we have a full set of support electronics for that second head? I've never even looked, honestly.
No, we have several of the things, but not everything.
Yeah, okay. So if we ever want to get the second unit working, maybe, but I don't know if we have enough tubes and yokes and everything else that's working to do that. So I don't know. My focus at the moment, when I get to it later this month or early next, is going to be to get enough of the head lashed together to see where we really are. At some point, we have to revisit the optics. I've got one optical system that will work. The other one will not. So at least we've got something we can use if I get to that point. I have nothing else to add unless somebody's got specific questions.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
Actually, I will. I will.
Wanted to wish everybody a good evening, and you are all the best. This is just always a wonderful thing to come to these meetings, and thank you so much for listening to me today. Have a good weekend.
Steve, can I say one more thing?
Of course.
I don't know how many people are left, but anybody who is in, excuse me, in proximity to Columbus, Ohio, start thinking about if you have any time, you can help me with this thing once I get some of the grunt work done. It really doesn't pay yet, but at some point, it's either going to take me forever or I'll need some help. Once I get the basics working, you talk about the presentation we had earlier. I forgot her name already. That was a 10-year process for one person.
Right.
Yeah. Now this one isn't that bad, I don't think. And but it's also not the only thing I'm working on either. So, it's something that could use some more help. If anybody's near Ohio, I will make my shop available to them going down the road once we're all COVID safe. So I just throw that out there for you.
Just seems like we're finding parts of the CCU units for a TK41. I've got a few pieces, but I think most of it was pretty much thrown out there back in the 60s and 70s. And so we're going to have to probably go to a plan B at some point because there's too many heads out there right now that no supports on them.
If we want more of them, the one that I'm working on is complete. We have all the pieces for it.
Oh, great.
Our second one, no, but I'm not making any attempt to get the second one working anyway. Yet. One at a time. So yeah, I'm sorry if that was misleading. The main unit at the museum is complete. We've got all the parts.
Is that the one they found down in Texas or something that was in a barn or in bad shape? Or I don't know if that's a rumor I heard or what, but
it was somewhere up north. We found 3 of them up north.
I will say it kind of looks like a barn might have been involved. Yeah.
It was they were in a barn.
Are they still there? I've lost my audio. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, we hear you, Chuck.
Okay.
Hey, Steve, on those three TK41s that you found up north, do you know where they came from? What station, or were they in New York or anything like
WGN.
that? Say that again.
WGN.
Oh, that's in Chicago.
Yeah.
Those did the Bozo show and everything. There's still one of those cameras up there in their museum up there, but they're not taking very good care of their artifacts up there. That TK10 they had that was used in the Nixon-Kennedy debate, I think everybody that's walked through that museum has had their hands on it, and the paint's wearing off, and their their TK41 up there looks like they dropped the viewfinder on it, did something, and it'd be nice if they had the rest of it. But they found their way up north, huh?
Yep.
Do they still have any of the WGN property tags on them or anything?
I can't remember. I think so.
Because I haven't.
Maybe one of them was, I can't remember. I vaguely remember that one of them came from the Milwaukee station, but I can't remember, so long ago.
I have a TK41 that came from Cincinnati there from the Crosley Broadcasting. What is it? Gosh, they have
WLWT.
That's it. I've got a camera from there, and it still has its logo on the side of it. That's it. But no CC unit, unfortunately.
I guess I'm going to drop out now, you guys. Unless there's something else coming up that's important.
I think we're pretty much out of steam, was my sense.
All right.
I'm going to drop out. Going to say goodbye too. If anybody wants to hang around and chat, I think Dave is going to keep it open.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna say goodbye too.
Okay.
Nice meeting. I love them. I'm glad we're going to keep them happening even after we start doing live because it's real good meetings.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you everybody for participating.
Okay.
I'm going to jump out too. I just arrived in Salina, Kansas on my way back to the East Coast from California. Have a good evening, everyone.
Okay, so long.
Good night.
No, I'm out as well. It's good seeing everybody.
Yes, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure being here.
Well, is there anybody left that might want some professional VHS pro machines or anything?
Maybe if you put a $20 bill in each one.
Then they'd be worth $20 each then, wouldn't they?
Sad.
Hey, Dave?
Hello.
Dave Sika.
Yeah, hello. Hi, John.
Hi. I don't know if you saw my little note in the chat. You know something about those Sony 8301s, right?
Yeah, I have one.
You ever seen sort of a Channel Master clone of that, or what looks to be like a clone, kind of a clone?
There's one that bears a resemblance to it, but I don't think it's a clone.
Well, a clone might be taking it too.
Yeah.
Any idea who made Channel Master?
I would think it would be a Japanese concern at that time.
Oh yeah, I mean it's definitely Japanese. I just wonder, I don't know, but I just don't know. I guess it was a competitor of Sony, of whoever they were.
Might have been Sanyo.
Yeah.
That's a good choice. I've got a little set that was a Singer that resembles that little Sony thing there.
I remember that.
That's another one. Yep.
That's back when Singer diversified into all kinds of other stuff. Yeah.
I've got a couple of those little sets there. I've got another one. I forget what it's called. It seems like it says Jet on it or something like that. It kind of resembles that Sony there from 1960. Have to dig that out.
Yeah, John, I think my Sony is the one it's in the museum. I think I put the set in there. I have the cover for mine too. I kept the cover here. I figured that was not gonna do well in the museum. It'll get either destroyed or lost or thrown away.
Well, that was a good idea. Yeah, I didn't realize that was yours. Yeah, I think they're they're fascinating sets. They used to turn up at ham fests from time to time. I managed to, several followed me home too.
Well,
Where I
the 5-inch set used to show up everywhere. The 8-inch one was, I don't recall seeing too many of those around. I've probably only seen less than half a dozen in my life.
Those little 5-inch Sonys, you find those just about everywhere. They must have made a zillion of those things.
You used to. I had one when they were new, so it kind of has a near and dear place in my heart.
I've got 4 or 5 of them there, and sometimes you can find them in their original little carrying case that look like a little a lady's case or something like that.
I've actually got a couple of extra cases. I should probably make an effort to get those to collectors that have a set and don't have a case. But yeah, they show up in the weirdest places. I just ordered a bunch of the high voltage rectifier tubes from Bob Dobush. I noticed he had some in stock. I figured those, they're not making those anymore. I put some on the shelf just in case.
For which set?
For the Sony, the 5-inch
The
Sony.
5-inch one? Okay, yeah, the ones.
Yeah. All solid state. Well, except for the high voltage rectifier tubes and the CRT, but all solid state. Yep.
Didn't they look? Am I thinking of something else? Didn't they almost look like little NE2s, like little neat? They were like little. They were little bitty things.
They weren't that small, but they were weird looking like that.
Might be thinking of something else.
No, you could be. I usually will misremember something like that, and it'll change shape or change size or something. Then I'll go back and I'll go, look at that.
How about the other little Sony? It's even smaller than 5-inch. The one that I forget the model number, but
the 4 dash something. Yeah, I got one of those hiding around here someplace too. My basement must look a lot like yours.
There's also the Watchman.
Oh yeah, that was.
Yep.
I always thought those. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I got a bunch of the little tiny sets, the little LCD sets and whatnot. The earlier and the worse quality picture, the better. But I've never crossed paths with one of those little Seiko wristwatch TVs. That would have been fun to find.
Oh,
that would be very cool.
Yeah, it would be. I always found that those little pancake picture tubes that Sony made, those little Watchmans with that real weird little tube. I was wondering whose idea was that, but apparently it worked quite well there, and it made a flat little TV set before they went to LCDs and stuff.
Yep.
There's one out at the Early Television Museum too. RCA made a color tube like that. They were trying to make a flat, a wall mount TV with a CRT in it.
Really? And how well did it work?
Yeah. I don't know. It looks like a functional artifact, but I don't know that they ever made anything out of it.
If you ever look in some of those old popular science magazines from 1955, they would show those wall-mounted TV sets like this is the thing of the future and this is what we're going to have. And we thought, now how are they ever going to do that? And little did we know. Now that's all there is.
Now that we live in the future.
Yeah.
I remember seeing in articles, and I wish I could find this publication. It was shortly after the World War II, and it said, obviously they were dead wrong, but they said television will never take off until it's large screen and color. And
there was one article it might have been a Popular Mechanics or one of those magazines back from the 50s. Someone had a little TV set that looked like a little miniature console, and anyway, they had a picture of it, but they said that we don't know if it worked. However it was worded, I think it was a fake. Someone said they had a little TV set. But I think the first time I ever saw one of those little mini Panasonics, that one with a 1-inch picture tube in it from 1969, I thought that was the neatest thing. Yeah. And anyway, I worked at Music Lane in the Bearden Shopping Center as well as that tube rebuilding plant. And we had one of those because we were selling Panasonic products. Well, there in the shopping center there was a drugstore down there. And I remember I brought that little TV set down there and you could snap a lens on the front of it. Man, I had an audience behind me. They had never seen anything like
Yeah,
this.
I wish I had one of those. They're very cool.
I might have an extra one of those somewhere. I've found a couple of them here in the past, but in fact, I found one here the other day. It's not a Panasonic, but it's complete. I found it at a yard sale there, and it was complete with had a little pouch for the extra screen that you pop in the front of it to make a large screen. But that always kind of gave me, I never wanted to watch it with that screen. It kind of bothered me to watch a magnified picture, you know.
Speaking of Panasonic, I realize this isn't that old or, anything, but I found this the other day and I think the whole thing in there. I just thought this was some kind of weird projection clock radio, but no, it actually is a TV set. And they refer to it as their desktop television with AM/FM radio, but
I had an old friend that gave me something similar to that here about a week ago. You remember the little pyramid TV set that it kind of pops up and all that?
Yep.
This is sort of like that. Looks just like an AM/FM radio, but you raise it up and it opens up into a little TV set there.
Yeah.
John, does your Panasonic work?
Yes. Well, it has a raster, of course. I haven't tried to actually hook up a VCR or a DVD player or anything like that, but it's a mirror projection. Like I said, when I first saw it in the thrift shop, I thought it was just a weird, goofy clock radio, but no, it's actually as a TV.
Well, they're beginning to, as rare as they are, they're beginning to turn up a little bit now in thrift stores and stuff. They're digging in their closets and the millennials are cleaning out. Let's see, James has got that WLW down there, 13. Where is that? That's not if that's channel 13, that's not.
That's one of my three. I was off of one of my three TK30s that I got from the Crosley Broadcasting.
Was that from Cincinnati?
Correct. Well, I have one from each of the stations.
WLW Cincinnati was channel 5. I grew up there.
No, this is 13.
I believe
Indianapolis, I believe.
WWL, the WLWI.
Oh,
Indianapolis.
That's the Indianapolis, yes.
Right. I have 3 cameras, TK30s, one from each of the Crosley stations.
WLW was scattered throughout Ohio and up around that Midwest. And
correct.
They were all WLW. Then you had one, mine, I believe, does say Channel 5 on it, my TK41. You got any extra signs there that you want to get rid of?
No, they came off with the one. I have 3 TK30s, and I only one of them had the markings on it.
I've got a TK 30 there, and I've got the part of the control unit, the desk there for the transmitter control. And I think it came out of San Francisco. I'd have to go out there and go look at it. See, I can't remember call letters anymore if I don't think about them often enough.
KGO maybe.
Give me a second. I'll find out what I got here. It's painted blue, by the way. It's KPIX, WKPIX, Channel 5. I think that's out in California, I think.
Yeah, San Francisco.
Yeah, San Francisco.
Oh, it's the CBS affiliate.
Yep, I watch it every day.
My neighbor is the chief engineer.
It's painted blue. Is that one of those CBS things then? You remember CBS hated RCA, and when they get their cameras, they painted them blue. And my, I've got a TK. I'll tell you what I've got that's interesting. I've got a, what's his name that passed? Whoop, did I lose somebody here? Wait, am I still here?
Yep.
Yeah, I had to drop. That was my iPhone.
Okay, I thought I dropped out. I've got, what's his name's TK40. That, anyway, it came from, oh, what's his name? I can't remember names worth a flip anymore.
Chuck?
They auctioned a camera up there at the museum up there, and I bought it. You know, geez, I can't remember. Well, anyway, it was it went to CBS, and of course, you know, CBS hated RCA. All the nomenclature's been taken off of it. What's really interesting about it, and I can't figure it out exactly, is that, you know, on a TK40, you have those little pinholes, and the logos on it had those little wires that stick through and they'd bend them over to hold them on the camera body. Well, every one of those little holes have been kind of spot welded or has a little round dot-like thing that covers all of the holes, and it looks like it's professionally done, that it was not an in-house thing at CBS. On top of that, they sprayed the inside of it black, and it's a factory paint job. And I'm still trying to determine or figure out whether this camera was made, you know, RCA made it specifically for CBS and left the nomenclature off and did a professional job of, you know, covering up the holes, or did CBS have a shop, in-house shop, that could do something like that and make it look factory?
That would be good research.
I've been working on that. They only made like 25 of these cameras, and mine's serial number 8. Geez, that name, what is his name out there? That he passed away here, you know, a few years back, and he developed that system to play those early 2-inch quad tapes there, and he got an Emmy Award for it. Geez, you guys should know. Come up with a name here.
Ed Righthand.
Yeah, Ed Rattan. Okay. Silly me. But anyway, I've been looking at that, and when you look at the inside of the camera, you can tell it was not a repaint. It's factory. And it's got those little tiny studs there that cover up those holes in it. And when you look at it from the outside, you can't tell that there was ever any nomenclature. The only thing on it, it would say color television, CBS television color on it. And I'm going to try and have one of those reproduced there that I can put the original sticker on the side of it. And that camera had quite a pedigree out there in Studio City there in Los Angeles. And
where are you located, Julian?
I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee. I've got a 6,000 square foot building that it's a new one. As many of you may already know, I had a terrible fire over 6 years ago, and I had to build a new building. I lost a lot of stuff that I didn't want to lose, but I didn't lose everything. But got a new building, and the problem, I was terribly underinsured on it, and I need to get a HIVAC system in there now. It's been hot and miserable here, and I can't spend a whole lot of time in there and straightening this place out. But I've got that camera there, and I just
a tour would really be good. A video tour.
I'm working on that right now. It looks like the basement of the Smithsonian, but I do have let me see if I can pull up a picture here of what it sort of looks like. Let's see, photos.
Yeah, well, Julian, you had said you might want to take one of these meetings. So if you want to do it, maybe when the weather cools off a little bit and you get a broom out there first, maybe that'll work out great.
I would like to do that. It's just I've got so much stuff, and I've been moving stuff around, and it just seems like even my floor space is taken up. Even have to set sometimes stuff on the floor.
We call that the Chinese puzzle at InfoEdge. You got to move something to move something else to move something else to get to what you wanted to do. Then you got to move it all back.
Let's see if I can. This is sort of in my house. I've got this thing now. My camera won't do right. I don't understand this. I don't understand that. When you have to do something here, it just won't do right. But I don't know. Let's see if this. I don't know if that comes through. I don't know if that. Some of my Catalan collection for that. And
that's a few $1,000s.
And right below it, I've got a 15 GP22 picture tube there that was out of a CBS set. Oh yeah. I also have. That's not. I don't know what is wrong with this.
Julian, it really must be nice to be rich.
Oh, I've been accused of it, but unfortunately, I always have to sometimes rob Peter to pay Paul. And
I'm surprised a CBS set would have a 15 HP22 in it, wouldn't it?
Well, it has a sticker on it that says for experimental use only.
That's probably the pre 15Gs then. That was the C numbers.
See if this makes any sense here. I also have that Admiral 15-inch set. I was up in Louisville, Kentucky up there, and there was a sign on the side of the interstate that said Antique Mall. And we'd like to have never found it. And I said, if I have to drive one more mile, I'm just turning around and going back. Well, of all the crazy things, we found it. Well, anyway, there was a lot of neat stuff in there. And I was walking back there, and my wife said, oh, there's some color sets here. And I walked behind one. I just stopped. I thought, oh, my God. I said, that's a 15-inch set. Now, what is it? It's not an RCA. And it's that 15-inch Admiral. And at that time, there was only like one known to exist. I think mine was the second one known to exist, but I think now there's like 4. But the crazy thing of it is, I've got Admiral's 1954 dealer showroom catalog, and it shows all these goofy, those sets of the 50s. It's got all those sets in it, totally uninteresting sets. And all of a sudden there's just this one page, and it's like, oh, by the way, if you want a color set, here's our color set. And it's just a one-page cut sheet in it that shows it, and it shows it's got the golden grid chassis in it or something like that. And it's kind of neat. I've never seen one before, and I've never seen one after, a dealer showroom book for that. It's got that set in it. And
this is one of my working TK30s that was used at the 60th anniversary of Disneyland. We were on the platform there by the train station. And as you can see, it doesn't have any of the logo on it because it was made to look like one of the original CBS cameras.
Ooh, here's one. This is what's, see if this makes any sense there. I've got that little 12-inch Bush set there, and I've got that Philco set, and it's a working set there. And I've got a DVD player that I show that one off with. And,
I grew up in Kentucky with the Admiral that has the world's largest molded Bakelite case, floor model.
Oh, I've got one of those. They made several different models of that. And I had another one there that I had this old storefront up on North Central Avenue, and the roof leaked a little bit. One time I walked in there, and I thought, oh my gosh, a rat's died in here. And I thought, well, this is on a Friday. I'll get to it on Monday. I came in on Monday, and you would have sworn there was a body in that place. And it turned out to be a raccoon that had gotten in there. That raccoon had gone through my speaker cabinets. It had gone through my tubes that I had. I mean, all my tubes looked like they were in confetti and stuff, and even bent the pins on them. But he went through, and he used I had one of those Admirals, that Bakelite cabinet, and I think he used it for a toilet. It was a mess. And I can't believe how much damage that thing had done before it had died in there. And I've got a spare chassis for one of those if anybody might need one. I've got an extra one for parts there. I got that from, you remember Harry Poster when he'd sell sets? He would take sets like that and then convert them over to like LCDs and, make them as a working static display.
He's still around.
He's still around. He's not doing too much of that, like that. But I was up at Chicago at the Radio Fest up there, and he just pulled the chassis out of it, and he was going to throw it away, picture tube and all. And of course, I grabbed it, and I've still got it.
Harry is a realist. I haven't seen him in a while, but he said he's in business to make money, and he does whatever he can make money with, and doesn't worry about the rest of it.
Incidentally, the little 3-inch pilot sets there, I've got a spare chassis for one of those. If anybody needs anything like that, an exotic or anything, I've got several of those sets, and
the picture tube is hard to find.
Yeah, it doesn't have a tube on it, unfortunately. I think I've got a working one here that's got a green screen in it.
Hey, very quickly, there is a photo. It's a picture of my working CCU and master monitor that we used at Disneyland for its 60th anniversary, and that's it.
Are those Conrads?
Very cool.
I think I probably told you, Jim. That's my pie in the sky long-term project. We have all 5 cases of the support equipment for the camera in our museum, but it's all in utterly original used condition. So it's going to be
these all work. These all work.
Yeah. Well, we got two of the I forget which one it is, but one of the cases has there's 2 identical pieces, and one of the inside is completely charred. It obviously caught very spectacularly on fire at one point, but then they must have got another one and kept the original one. And that first one will definitely not be getting restored.
Wow, look at that.
It's made out of solid bronze there. It's about 30 inches by 30 inches and weighs about 60 pounds. My friend up in New York there, from Waves up there, he cleaned out an office up there in Radio City, and he found that in there. I had to pay dearly for it, but actually he had sold it to Danny Gustafson there years ago. And then when he passed away, Bruce had gotten it back, and I wanted that. As far as I know, they only made 2 of those. And when they changed that snake logo to their later logo, they took them off the side of the building. I forget which side of the building, but there was only 2 of them. And fortunately, I've got that one. And see if I can find some more original stuff here. I know I've got pictures.
Well, Northern California has a check off, so we will see you guys next time. Over and out.
Good night.
Good night, Dave. Take care of New Jersey for me, will you?
New Jersey's taking care of itself. It doesn't need my help, but okay, thank you.
All my little. The 11 feather birds there. Oh, see those 2 little color things up above there? Those little 6 color. Those are out of the NBC store in New York City. As you go up the stairwell there, it's lined with those things. And over the years, people have kind of knocked them off or pulled them off. And I made friends with one of the guys there. He says, "Oh, come here." He goes over there and opens up a drawer, and he's got a half a dozen of them in there, that have been kind of bent that they can't use. He gave me a few of them. I thought I might be able to use those on one of my cameras. The only problem with having 10 million pictures in your phone, it's hard to index them.
Oh, sorry, the time got away from me and I missed the presentation, so I'll go off and have dinner now. Take care, everybody.
So long. Hey, Frank, this was tonight's show. Here. There you go.
That's Ed Rattan's camera there, that TK40. That one.
I think Ed had one and Chuck Ferris has one. I think that's the only two that I know of.
I don't know if Chuck Ferris still has that again. He's been selling some of his stuff there. And
yeah,
I bought a bunch
trying to get him to do one of
these.
these meetings too before he gets rid of everything.
I don't know if that's much of anything. Part of my microphone. I don't know if you can see those well enough there.
Nah, it doesn't show up too good off of the phone.
Yeah, it doesn't. God, I've got over 800 microphones in that cabinet. Oh, yeah. This is part of my new building there, if that makes any sense there. I don't know if you can see everything stacked up. And that's when you could actually walk through it. It's even worse than that now.
John, I think he's got you beat.
My basement is not 6,000 square feet. I can tell you that.
But if it was, you'd fill it up nonetheless, right?
Joe Crow's basement in pictures, I don't know what kind of lens people used, looked like it was 6,000 square feet, even though it was, only about 20 by 20 or 30 by 30.
It's a 60 by 80.
Expands.
It's a 60 by 80 building, and I've got a balcony up there, and it makes it just about 6,000 square feet.
Wow.
And I'm getting ready. When I get a little bit more, I've got to continue the balcony around to the front of the building, make it L-shaped. But instead of having it come out 10 feet from the wall, I'm going to have it about 20 or 25 feet. So